Hey everyone, welcome to podcast number 3 of the Looking Around the Corner podcast series. Today is a special treat. I actually have a real life rocket scientist on the show. I don't know any of the rocket scientists in my life, but I want to introduce Dr. Camille Alleyne. She has a unbelievably long list of accomplishments, but I could briefly tell you that she is a rocket scientist at NASA for the last, I think, 25 years, if I'm not mistaken. She holds a PhD in I can't. There's so many things she actually holds a degree in. It's quite amazing.
Educational leadership, actually.
Yes, and educational leadership, and she has a Master of Science of Aerospace Engineering, a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering, and a bachelor's also in the same field. She is a strong proponent of global STEM education for girls, and she also has a foundation, which we'll talk about during our discussion. I actually met Camille on the Clubhouse app, which has really caught on fire for a lot of people. And we were in a room for like asteroid mining or something like that, because we're all space geeks, in these rooms. So I'm very fortunate to have Camille on, and her story is amazing. It is the true story of an immigrant realizing the American dream. So Camille, welcome to the show, and tell us your journey.
Falcon, nice. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here with you and your audience. I hope they find my story inspiring in some way and it uplifts them. We're going through a really difficult time. It's been a really tough year for everyone. And so these moments are bright spots, I hope.
Definitely.
So, as you said, I'm Camille Alleyne. I was born in Trinidad and Tobago. Migrated to the US almost 40 years ago, not quite, about 37 or 38 years old. But as a child, I remember, as I always look back and reminisce, always being fascinated by space. At the age of 6 or 7 years old, every night I would go out in the trunk of my dad's car, sit in the trunk of my dad's car, and just stargaze and be fascinated by the night sky. And of course, in Trinidad, I am thinking back now, it's not a lot of pollution, so you can see the vastness of the night sky, and it's so vivid to me. And I was just fascinated. Not knowing what that was, though, just a curiosity and a fascination, right? But I grew up as a kid that was really very inquisitive, very curious. My mom says I was asking these questions at the age of 2, like, how do the lights turn on, Mom? Oh, no. So always very curious, always had an analytical mind. Would always be breaking things around the house and then building it back up. And I always say when things broke, my mom didn't call my dad, she called me to fix them, right? The appliances and stuff like that. So all that was laying the foundation for me, right? And I was a pretty good student. I was really good in math, really a stellar math student. In high school, in middle school and high school. I didn't know in middle school what that was, but in high school, I realized, oh, I got some here. Yeah. I look back on my report cards and the grades were excellent. And I was like, wow, like I'm good at this. I'm good at math. And that's all I wanted to do, math and science. So that really was the foundation for me that was setting me on a trajectory for what has been an amazing career that I've had.
Yeah, your journey, and I read your bio, and then we spoke a few days ago just on the phone. It's amazing. I think my first love has always been space too. People think that you're a physician, so what is this space business? And I was like, well, no, actually, just like you, when I was a kid, we moved from India when I was about 3.5, 4 years old. And as far back as I can remember, I've always been gravitated towards science, particularly like biology, physics. And I grew up in New York City, and where there was a lot of light pollution. But every so often, if we went out into the suburbs or we went, on a small vacation or something, and it was dark enough, you'd look out and it'd be like, wow, what is all this that I can see out here that I can't see in Queens, New York? And it was fascinating. And then, and as I, got older in childhood, I would just, go to the public library, just read up on stuff. My favorite channel growing up was PBS. I mean, I grew up on all the PBS programming, from Sesame Street to 321 Contact to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I mean, to this day, it's near and dear to my heart. And, I try to do whatever I can to support it financially. And it makes such a huge impact. And this is what the impact of early exposure to science and math and engineering and mathematics, everything is. This STEM or STEAM exposure at an early age, it literally imprints it so much for children as they grow up, just like it did for you and did for me. And I always thought that one day if I could do something where it could help us get out there into space, I'd love to do it. And now in this sort of second part of my career, I'm trying to work towards that. And but there's not that many people you could talk to about this. Most people just look at you like, okay, I'm gonna walk away now, including my own family. So I'm like giddy like a little kid right now talking to you, but I was just like, wow, I don't have to explain myself. You don't have to explain yourself. We just get it. And I'd love to hear more about, how was the journey after you got here into then getting, involved with NASA, and you've been there for so long and you've risen to a lot of positions of leadership, and, and especially as a woman of color who has been highly successful, what's your message out to everyone else out there listening to this?
So I would say what played a pivotal role. Actually, we're going to talk about my foundation and really my work in the world is advocacy of girls in STEM. But that really started for me in high school because I went to an all-girl high school. And I believe that was pivotal for me being able to be whatever it is I wanted to be, or choose the subjects. At that point, you're kind of choosing subjects. It's not like in the US where you have to do like 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 4 years of, you have to do like English and math and a science, but you can pick to do all the sciences, the physics, the chemistry, the further math, or you could do the geography, the history, the social sciences. Yeah. And because of my love for math and science, of course, that was the track I took. And there weren't many girls. I was one of 10 girls in a high school graduating class of maybe 100 that did all the sciences, right? But I always knew that was something unique. And so fast forward, and that's where my passion for focusing on girls and science and stuff like that happened. But you're from India, so you know that there are only a few professions that our parents knew, right? I always say that there were 4 or 5 things. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, a nurse, or an accountant. Like that was it. Yes. Nothing else existed in the world, right? And so I knew I didn't want to do any of those. I did not like biology. I was talking to my daughter who she's in grad school, but wants to go to med school actually. And I was telling her that I just couldn't dissect those rats and mice and stuff.
It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone.
That was not my thing. Yeah. But physics and chemistry, I loved chemistry. And so we had a family friend. Trinidad is big in oil. It's the main export is oil and natural gas. And so we had a family friend who was a petroleum engineer. And I remember thinking that was so different. I didn't even know what an engineer did, honestly. Yeah. But I knew it was different, right? And I remember asking my mom, did he make a lot of money? And she said, yes. I'm like, that's what I'm doing.
That's it. That's the field.
That's it. And you needed math and science. So I was well on the way, right, to pursuing a career in engineering. But then I had to decide, well, what type of engineering? Because there are all these different, it's such a diverse field. And so, of course, I knew I could have done petroleum engineering because if I stayed in Trinidad or came back to Trinidad, I was going to migrate anyway because my mom is American. My sisters were already up here. But if I was going to do petroleum engineering, I would come back to Trinidad and do that. It would be natural. I could do chemical engineering because I loved chemistry. I remember I had a teacher that was so passionate about organic chemistry. It's still one of my favorite things. But then I loved planes because as a kid, we traveled to the US every 2 years.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with planes because it was so different. It was just like this thing. Like I always wanted to pursue things that was wild for other people.
Yeah.
But for me, it was a challenge, right? And I was like, planes, I love planes. Maybe I could do aeronautical engineering. And so that's what I decided to do, not knowing anybody who did that. But I was like, I want to learn to design planes. So I migrated to the States to start college.
Yeah.
And it was my freshman year. I'm dating myself, but 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger tragedy happened. Yes. It blew up upon launch, right? That. January 20th, 1986. And I tell you, Falcon, it blew my mind because that was my first like entree to knowing there was a place called NASA. I had just migrated from Trinidad, and we're talking about the 80s. So it's not like we have cable TV now and these kids from all corners of the world know about NASA and all this stuff. We didn't have that. So this was like an eye-opening experience for me, NASA, that there was a thing called a space shuttle and that you could have a job as an astronaut. And I was hooked. I was like, that's what I want to do. And I switched. Luckily, Howard had it was a mechanical engineering degree, but you can focus on aerospace and concentrate. So I did things like aerodynamics and propulsions and aerostructures and all that stuff. And I did my senior project on computational modeling of the space shuttle system and stuff like that. I mean, and my friends thought I was crazy. They were like, who are you?
I was going to ask you.
They didn't even know what the heck I was doing.
what did you say at parties when people asked, so what are you studying?
Yeah, but I mean, they just knew I was in engineering. Yeah. I don't think they could grasp what it was that I was doing. It's only now people are like, oh my God, like, look at her, like, hi, you know what I'm saying? But back then it was, and to me, it wasn't anything. I was just doing what I loved. It wasn't anything special, it was just like I was doing the things that I love. And I didn't love every part of engineering, but I loved aerospace. I loved aerodynamics and stuff like that. And 6 years, I got my bachelor's and then I got my first master's. And I was offered my first job at Kennedy Space Center. I was driving into the gates of Kennedy Space Center. That was 25 years ago.
That is awesome. I mean,
it's the power of belief. It's the power of your thoughts, your intentions, working hard and being determined and focused. And the universe to me does the rest, right? You put in the work, the universe does the rest.
It's funny you said that last part, the power of belief, willing it so that it happens. That's something that I think a lot of people don't think exists. I mean, I'm a believer in it. I don't think you can do difficult things in life and be successful without having some very innate sort of like a kernel, that a seed that grows inside you that says, I don't, by hell or high water, this is going to happen.
Absolutely.
If the laws of physics can make this happen, I will make this happen.
Absolutely.
And I wish more people thought that way, because it's very easy to give up when times get hard, right? And you know this. I mean, you went through rigorous training, you went through hardships and stuff. It's very easy to just give up on the first bump. The first time someone bumps you on that shoulder, you're like, I don't think I should go down this path. But I love your story because you followed a childhood dream. I mean, not many people can say that they followed their childhood dream and then and it worked. You know, it worked out in the long run, and they're able to channel that energy. You know, after all of the trials and tribulations. So I think that's beautiful. Like the fact
I
that
would
you went
say
through
I
that.
followed my passion.
Yeah,
And this is the message I give to young people, is to find that one thing or two things or three things that you love, and
hmm,
try to make a living out of that. I feel
yeah,
like that's where the fulfillment of life happens, right?
it's
And so
true.
that's what I don't know if it's good fortune, I don't know what it is. It's just I've always had that belief that I'm not going to settle, you know. And as I've gotten older, I know this is not a dress rehearsal. This is one chance at life. Why not live it the way you want to live it? You get to say. And so for some reason, I had that kind of thought process very early on, even before I could put language and meaning and rationale to it, right?
Of course.
But it was what I always pursue. Always, that's the way I lived my life.
No, I think that's an amazing message, and I think more people need to hear that, because as I kind of observe, you know, how I guess our social fabric and just our overall culture and the world in general has evolved and changed over, you know, over all the time that we lived here in America. It just seems like a lot of people, they kill their own dreams because they say, well, how am I going to make a living doing this? And honestly, you alluded to this in the beginning of our conversation, where uh, some of us come from cultures where there was like five things you were expected to become, one of five things. And the resonating thing between all of them was there was education involved, and secondly, you would get paid at least enough so that you and your family could lead a comfortable life.
Exactly.
And I think the notion of comfort is a very dangerous thing sometimes. I've come to believe that comfort is like a leash, an invisible leash around your neck, and it slowly just strangulates you the more comfortable you get. And
Absolutely.
I don't think there is a I don't think that you should get too comfortable in a situation. And this year is an example of that, right? All but a handful of people, you know, in infectious diseases or in science, could have predicted that we were going to have this type of pandemic. Most people were like, what happened? And we're
Mm.
still going through it, obviously.
Mhm.
And it's a great example of like, you can't really predict it. I mean, you know, people look how many people are unemployed. Look at how many people are suffering, and there's, you know, mental health
Look how many
issues,
people
everything,
have lost their lives.
their
Hundreds of
lives.
thousands of people who started the year with us are not going to end the year with us,
And
right?
it's horrible. It's depressing, and then add to that a sense of desperation that people may have to be like, you know, they feel regret. They feel like, well, you know what? If this is going to happen, why can't I just pursue my passion? And I think things are changing a little bit, where, you know, you have more people that, you know, say are creative and they can have a platform and they can be supported monetarily. But I think that childhood passion, like what you're talking about, we as a society need to do more to foster that, because then we have more Camilles, we have more, you know, astronauts and scientists and whatever they want to do. We have more creatives or artists, musicians. I mean, that's what makes life beautiful, society beautiful. So I'm
Absolutely.
so glad that you're here as like as an example of like, look what could happen. and,
Yeah.
and 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 I'd love to hear more about, like, you know, when you started at NASA, you know, what was your experience? I mean, this was 25 years ago, right? So it was a whole different time.
Look, Farron, I could remember it like it was yesterday. The first couple of years being at Kennedy Space Center of all places, which is where we launched the space shuttle from, right? It's our U.S. launch complex. So we do all the launches from there.
Yeah,
We do some
historic.
launches from Vandenberg, at least SpaceX's, but for US space transportation system, it was done at Kennedy. And so I remember the first time seeing the space shuttle on the launch pad the night before launch, I can't even describe it. Goosebumps, because you're looking up at this monstrosity, right? And you just, for me, because I had the posters on my wall all during college of the space shuttle on the back of the 747 coming back from Edwards, and and then it on the launch pad, and to actually see it in person and be working. My first job was as a flight systems test engineer. So my role was testing the fluid systems, the environmental control systems of the labs that flew in the cargo bay of the space shuttle. Because at that time, we were just starting to do like really space research and microgravity research on the station, on this shuttle. It will go for 7 to 14 days, orbit Earth. They'll have this lab in the cargo bay, and so the astronauts will be doing experiments, and so making sure that the lab was environmentally sound for the astronauts to survive and stuff. That was like my first job, testing the cargo base, the payload systems for the shuttle. Just really extraordinary. I can't tell you, just having a dream and having that dream come true like that, just really extraordinary. But it didn't just happen. It happened because of hard work, determination, perseverance. When people are like, you are crazy, you want to be an astronaut? Like, what the heck? Like, what is that? Like, that is not even possible. And for me, I didn't actually even know how to do that. But just being like, no, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to pursue it, So I spent a few years at Kennedy Space Center, and my career kind of moved around a little bit. Went back to school to get my second master's, and my PhD, didn't finish that. End up spending some time at the Department of Defense doing missile defense work. So again, my passion was always aerospace. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to work for the missile defense, I'm going to do missiles and stuff like that. So I spent a few years, designing missile systems and that whole thing. And then it was at Missile Defense Agency in 2003. I had applied for the astronaut program several times before that. But this year I got a call inviting me to come down for the interview. And that was a big deal, because they had, at that year, they had about 5,000 or 6,000 applicants, and they only invited 100 people to interview. You're considered a finalist, and you go through like these medical tests. I mean, anywhere that could be poked and prodded, they were poking and prodding you, right?
Yeah.
And we had an interview with a bunch of astronauts that was nerve-wracking. And you would simulate some spacewalking where they'd suspend you, and you'll show if you could follow instructions and do the stuff, some robotics, arm work. I mean, it was an amazing experience. And that year they selected 12. I wasn't one of the 12, but I knew that, oh my God, even getting to that point, Falcon,
it's hard.
It's this little girl from the small dot in the Caribbean Sea, getting to that point, getting so close, was just, it was a testament to me that, you really, your dreams, you never give up on those, and you pursue them and they may not turn out as you want, but the journey getting there is where the real lessons are, So I started my career on the space shuttle. I've spent time working on the Orion crew capsule, which is still in development, and it is what is going to send take our astronauts to the moon. They just announced this Artemis team of 18 astronauts that would be eligible for that trip to the moon. So the Orion capsule is what will take them there. So I got a chance to lead some requirements development, systems engineering for that. And then I was offered a position to work on the space station as the associate program scientist. And those were amazing years, because as you know, the space station is a science lab, and really understanding the environment of microgravity and the type of discoveries we could have and working with researchers from all across the world. I mean, that was just one of the highlights of my career, that really, and now I get to do that again in a different way, kind of commercializing space. But I've gotten to spend some time doing science exploration at NASA headquarters, where we sponsor all the science missions, the planetary missions. I talked earlier about Mars, Perseverance, and Clubhouse. The James Webb Space Telescope that will be launching in a few months. That's going to have amazing scientific discoveries. And then, of course, our earth science portfolio. So I just, when I look back at my career, it's just been truly extraordinary. I've worked on every major human spaceflight program except the Apollo mission, because I wasn't born yet. Space Shuttle, Space Station, Orion, and then getting to work on science exploration, planetary Earth, heliophysics, which is studying the sun, and then astrophysics. Just the breadth of things that I've been able to do and accomplish at high levels have truly been extraordinary. Like, I'm so blessed.
No, definitely. I mean, yeah, I didn't realize you worked on so many of these things. Wow. That is an amazing amount of experience and skills. And what's and I'm sure you've met some very interesting personalities in your journey. Any particular memories or individuals that really struck you as motivational or inspirational, or that?
Well, I always say that I have never met more brilliant people than I have the people I've worked with at NASA. We have a mentality that we can solve any problem. Not that failure is not an option. I mean, obviously, we know that mantra from Apollo, but that we have disciplined processes that we use to solve problems. That's what we are. We are problem solvers. And so when the pandemic hit, NASA stood up and our engineers stood up and said, no, there are things that we could design and develop that can help our populations, ventilators, different things. I mean, we had our scientists and researchers and engineers step up and say, no, we can do these things. Because we are used to solving hard problems. And so just being in that environment, and you take that for granted because that's just my world. And I have one of my other best friends who I've worked with for a decade or so. We always tell each other, it's like, the things that we struggle with, or we beat ourselves up, other people will be like, are you crazy? Like, you are operating on this level. Like, do you realize the kind of stuff that you've done already or whatever? So it's just a different, I feel like we're in a bubble. This is not real world, this is not how people often live their lives, but it's just kind of natural for us.
You mentioned something about failure, right? And confronting it and not being afraid of it. What's your advice to people that have this fear of failure, whether it's externally impressed upon them because, maybe from their family, their culture, their, neighborhood, their whatever influences they have externally that tell them, why would you do that? Don't do that. You're going to fail. You're going to, because I always looked at failure as, well, you're going to learn something and that's going to help you succeed. And everyone that I've ever heard of or known in my life that I respected and that succeeded despite all their failures, every one of them said that that's part of the journey. But yet I feel a lot of people are held back in their own mind because of the self-doubt of this notion of what failure is. So what is you, and how do you advise people get past that so you can have the mentality that you have?
But it's not a natural, I mean, it is natural to fear failure. It's the fear of failure that
Yes.
stops people. And that's natural. We all have it. Fear is a natural part of what it means to be human and our human experience, right? But what you have to realize is do not let that fear stop you. Acknowledge the fear, don't resist it. Acknowledge, say, I am scared. And I'm kind of going through that now with like wanting to start my own company and all that stuff. That's a whole other thing because I've never done business. I've never been an entrepreneur. And I'm like, oh my God, what if I don't eat? I have to go back to eating ramen noodles or something. So I'm like, ah. So fear is like a real thing. And the definition of courage is acting in spite of the fear. So acknowledging the fear and still acting and coming out on the other side. And that the reward of just being able to accomplish what it was when you started with fear is just really very, you know, it's juice, you know, it's the icing on the cake.
Do you think that because you were, at NASA from day one, you were surrounded by, other people who they were also fearful of failure, but they were able to mentally get past that you already had this, built-in sort of support system to say that, look, we're all in this together. If one person fails, we all fail.
And it's a team effort. So yes, for sure.
So do you think advice to people out there that are maybe surrounding themselves with naysayers all the time? And I use I have two girls, so this podcast is actually very special to me because I want my kids to see this, and I always tell them that in general humans can be like crabs in a bucket. One tries to get out and then 10 pull him or her back in. So sometimes you have to do your best to get out of that bucket and surround yourself with people that, instead of saying, why would you do that? They'll say, why not do that?
Exactly.
We're still here for you, even if you don't succeed in this one try.
Absolutely. That's the key. That's the key, is surrounding yourself with people who will support you, who see your greatness, right? And would not allow you to just sit back and play it safe. Yes. But they're like, no, we believe in you and you go do it and we'll be here to support you. And so that's really important because you are a reflection of the people around you.
Yeah. I heard somewhere, it was one of these motivational talks or books, that you're basically the average of the 5 people around you.
Absolutely.
So who are the 5 people in a way?
Yeah. No. But don't spread all the things you want to do. Sometimes people talk too much and then that kind of negative energy comes towards them, right?
Yes.
So you pick a few people that are going to support you, are positive, and then you go and you keep your stuff quiet and you put your head down and you do it. And then
that's good advice too.
People are like, what? Where did that come
from? Envy and jealousy are very bad emotions.
Yeah.
And at scale, they can be immensely hurtful. So
especially when people around you don't want to do anything. So they want to pull you down too, because it makes them feel better about themselves, Well,
it's like the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of people don't do really anything. 20% are the ones who sort of drive progress and sort of move us along as a species almost. And I'm glad to hear that, your perspective on that, because, I could imagine that, being a woman of color as an immigrant to this country, working in, NASA.
White male dominated spaces, not just male dominated spaces, white male dominated spaces. I don't even know how I navigate it. I think sometimes naivety is important because, I didn't know what I didn't know, and you're just naive and you just
went for it.
You just do your thing, It hasn't always been easy though, for sure. It's been, there have been some rocky times, as you can imagine. But I have learned that, what people do to you is not about you, it's about them. Has nothing to do with you. Keep your head down. You keep pursuit. My mantra is pursuit of excellence, always pursuing excellence. People could deal with mediocrity. They can deal with when you're excellent, but that's not my problem, right?
Yeah.
So
You
you
can
just
only
do
deal
your
with what you
thing.
can deal with. Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay.
So when I ask you, as you made your way, in your time at NASA with your different roles, now you're in a role that focuses on commercialization, and this is a huge hotspot right now in innovation, in venture capital, even in just the business ecosystem. Everybody's looking for the next catalyst, the next inflection point. And with SpaceX, leading the way in now, not just inventing, but also proving the reusability of rocket technology. I mean, the per kilogram cost, just getting, anything out into space has exponentially come down, and most likely will continue to come down as we have more advances. What is your take on the commercialization space from the perspective of, you've been in the leading government, international organization that spearheaded so many space initiatives, but NASA has also over time transitioned from a pure public funding model to a public-private, partnership.
Yeah.
So what do you say to people, let's say like me, who are aspiring to, potentially have a space-focused, venture? What do you say to them? Like, where are the opportunities? Where's the support? And why not?
Now is the time. There is no time. I am just amazed at the time that we live in, because Elon started his company 2002, and people are like, you're crazy, because many people had done. He wasn't the first billionaire to do this. Andrew Beale, a few years before him, attempted the same thing and failed because there wasn't the will of the government to really support commercialization.
Yeah.
He came along and there was kind of this alignment, but it's expanded so much since then, and I think the government is moving to a model now where they want to put the risk more on the private sector, and we know that it drives innovation.
Yes.
There's nothing that we could come up. NASA had reusability studies for years before Elon came, besides the space shuttle. There were other teams working on reusability, and they never thought it was feasible. And here's Elon doing what he's doing, like landing 2 boosters simultaneously. It's like mind blowing, right?
Yeah.
So
I get goosebumps every time I see that video. To this day, I'm just like, it's very inspirational. Like if I have a down day and about what I'm thinking about doing, and I watch that video and I'm like, what am I complaining about?
I marvel at what they've been able to accomplish. But it really has opened up what's possible. And so we know private sector will push the boundaries of innovation far beyond what NASA could do, right? And that's the beauty of this private public partnership. But with competition drives lower cost models, right? And that's what we want to spend. We want to drive costs down. We want to drive prices down because it's just better for the government. And so now is the time. But it's not just launch vehicles. It's not just the market of launch vehicles and transportation systems. You got to be transporting something, or else what the heck are the transportation systems for, right? Yeah, exactly. So small satellites, for example, are revolutionizing access to space for all people around the world, right? Developing countries who never thought that they could be part of space exploration now can do that, use small satellites as an educational tool to educate a population of engineers and scientists and stuff like that, and so that they can get into space. And then, of course, we have the International Space Station, which is the science lab, open for researchers, open for technologists, people who are into manufacturing, 3D printing, all this stuff, material. You know, we have this platform that's available for developing demand for space, the access to space. And beyond that, I shared with you commercial space stations are the next big things in low Earth orbit for space tourism, for as lab platforms where, you know, the government, NASA, could just buy a service from by use of a particular facility, or you can send your astronauts to this commercial space station to do human research. But then, you know, that opens up a whole economy for that drives the you know, space private sector.
Are you seeing the same way NASA is doing these partnerships and really, you know, cultivating and fostering this ecosystem of innovation via the private sector? Are you seeing other countries that have space agencies following suit, or do you feel like there's stagnation there? Like, can you speak to, you know, how those in other locales other than the United States could potentially either benefit from this type of paradigm?
Yeah, so it's an international space station. So we have a partnership with Europe, Japan, Canada, and then Russia on the other side. And so they are also pursuing commercialization. I know Japan for sure has a fledgling new space commerce industry, a lot like the US is. And then the small launcher market, the small launch vehicle market is not just a US thing. It's happening all over the world. There are countries in Europe. I mean, there are companies in Europe, and there are companies in Japan, China, and all over, you know, that as being stood up to develop small launchers to be able to transport these small satellites. So they feel like there's a market. And so, no, this is being fostered all over the world.
All over the world, yeah. And you know, this is something I think you brought up in a discussion in a different forum, which I think is worth repeating, that, you know, there is the magical sort of mysterious thinking of what we can do in space. And I think, you know, a lot of science fiction movies and shows have I think inspired a lot of people to think about what we can do. And my favorite is The Expanse. I think it's probably the most scientifically sound of all of the shows I've ever seen, you know, or movies, from Star Trek to, you know, all the Star Wars series, and then, you know, anything else in between. But it's interesting to think that there's the reality and the practical aspects, which I know you have alluded to in different forums.
All the time. That's what I'm there for. I'm there for the reality check.
Yeah, the reality. So what do you say to the people that, you know, ask questions like, okay, so how soon are we going to be able to do what they do in The Expanse and mine ice off of asteroids? Like in the first 3 episodes, you know, you see them in these ships, and they have ice blocks coming off of asteroids, and then it goes to the, you know, another asteroid station, and it's amazing to watch, because you're like, man, I can see, yeah, that could happen. You know, it's not like, you know, we're not talking about like, you know, beaming people across the universe. We're talking about something that is a physical, you know, based in the laws of physics.
Yeah.
But because you've been in the industry and you've been on the government side, what's the practicality for these type of technologies?
I would say within years. I mean, I said that we're doing it now, right? Japan just returned its first asteroid samples literally a few weeks ago, first time. NASA is at the asteroid Bennu with a mission called OSIRIS-REx, returning in the next few years. So we are already doing that. I think the question is there a market for that? Can you create an economy out of asteroid mining? And I think the jury's still out on that. Like, where's the market? What exactly are you mining? You know, I asked that question. What are you mining? Like, do you just go out and grab it and come back, and then you figure out what it's made up of? Or Do you feel like that investigation needs to be done ahead of time? And then you're like, okay, that is a rare material that we don't have here on Earth. Because again, if we have it on Earth, why would you want to spend all that money to develop such complex systems to go, that doesn't make sense. So it has to, there should be a reason why when there's a market, when we're talking about commercialization, there has to be a return on the investment, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just for discovery. Now we're in the business, the government is in the business of scientific discovery. So we would invest in things like that. And that's what we're doing with OSIRIS-REx. But when you talk about commercialization, there has to be a return on investment. There has to be a market, or else it's not going to be sustainable.
Where do you, in the foreseeable future, so let's say a 10-year horizon, in a 10-year horizon, where do you see the markets, either now or in the 10-year horizon, coming into play? Is it in the low Earth orbit or LEO sort of area? Is it lunar? Is it interplanetary? I mean, asteroids, obviously, that's very, no pun intended, but pie in the sky type of thinking, but it's highly lucrative if you can figure out the market for that, because valuation of some of these asteroids that have already been sort of, have been examined is in like trillions of dollars. Like, one of these hunks of rocks is like trillions of dollars, and it's like the next oil rush or whatever it is. But
because of the rarity of it, right? The values and the rarity.
Yeah. But where do you see the next 10 years going?
Low Earth orbit. Pharmaceuticals, for example, using the environment of microgravity, right, to develop drugs, to study diseases, right, in biological sciences. I think there's a big market there. I think materials, right, understanding, using the environment to understand materials, right, and so that maybe we could develop it better here, composite materials, stuff like that. Or of course, 3D printing, we're doing a lot of that in space. That definitely has a use for further space exploration. You don't know all the tools that you're gonna have to take on a long duration flight mission to Mars. So you want to be able to manufacture tools, in transit. So 3D printing, additive manufacturing is going to be a big deal. I think those are like the big areas.
Yeah,
I see.
So it seems like the general theme I got out of what you just said was to try to take the things that we do on Earth and to try to do them in low Earth orbit and take advantage of microgravity, take advantage of the fact that we can make higher quality either materials or processes, and then see how we can translate that to earthbound applications. But
exactly,
you sort of have this factories or production areas in space already. Would that help us then move to, for example, lunar, colonization and mining and resource extraction, and then ultimately, does low Earth orbit function almost as a jump-off point, as opposed to Earth itself being the jump-off point?
Absolutely. It serves as a jumping off point. It serves as a point where we learn, especially when you're dealing with humans. The space tourism, even if it's not the government, people want to take a trip to the moon. Like, you want to know how the human body is going to survive that.
Yeah.
However long that duration is. So being close enough home where you could do that kind of, those investigations, that kind of research, is really the beauty of a platform like the ISS in low Earth orbit.
And speaking of humans in space, whether it's low Earth orbit, or suborbital flights, even to interplanetary or lunar missions, what are the top challenges that that have been identified that really need to have resolution, or some type of technological advances that the private sector could work on, that NASA and comparable agencies would support for like proof of concept or even further development?
Well, yeah, this is your area. Definitely space radiation. How do we protect the human body from the exposure of space radiation? That's the number one risk to long duration flight beyond Earth for humans, right? So that is one thing. We also have the psychological effects. How do we solve that? You're cooped up in a can, you may be with two other people on this long mission, right? And so there are going to be psychological effects. We know that with astronauts on the space station. So dealing with that, dealing with things like the vision, because we know astronauts, their vision acuity goes down on a long duration flight. So how do you solve that problem? So they're kind of these space adaptation effects. How do you keep them healthy? Right, from losing bone and muscle, that's a natural thing that's going to happen. But what are the countermeasures that you could put in place? And we know exercise is a big deal. It is a huge countermeasure to keeping them healthy, right? But how do you design these systems with all this equipment that you need to take on this long duration flight just to keep the humans healthy and safe, so that when they get there, they're able to do the exploration and come back? I think there's so many areas within that needs innovative solutions.
So there's obviously no shortage of problems that we have to address. There's probably not a shortage of ambitious, inventors and scientists and founders that would like to work on it. I think one question, and this is a question I ask myself based on my interest, is how does one even start if you have an idea? So your idea of working on just safety in space for humans, the ocular symptoms, the radiation, which is an area I'm trying to work on. Where does one go to say, okay, how do I even get a proof of concept? I don't have hundreds and thousands of dollars laying around, nor do I want to sit there and go into debt for this kind of money. Where does someone go? Because I think, that's also an area, it's very murky, where if you want to start a fintech company, okay, here's what you got to do for that. If you want to start a SaaS company, okay, there's, these are all earthbound solutions that are already there. Space exploration has always had this, the stereotype or perception, probably to the lay public, like it is expensive to do anything space related. So any solutions, any programs?
Well, again, it's a perfect time because the government is enabling space commercialization, right? We're enabling development of economies in space. And so there are a lot of areas, or maybe grants, agreements that could be put in place with the government. Not just NASA, DOD has needs too. The US Space Force and all this stuff, there are needs there from a technological perspective. Of course, NASA has needs for humans, but there are a lot of resources out there where the government will fund proof of concepts, right? They will fund ideas if it aligns with the mission that we are trying to carry out, right? Which is the future human exploration of space. And so if it's in line with the mission and goals that NASA has, then you can get funding. It's available.
I think what may be helpful is offline, if you have a list of those resources or where people can go, I'll put it on the show notes. And so
there's a Leo. So NASA.gov is a extraordinary resource for any kind of questions you want answered. And Leo Economy, I think, is one of the websites. You could Google it, NASA Leo Economy, and it would take you to exactly where all the information is and how you could submit a proposal and all that stuff. So it's right there on the NASA.gov site.
Interesting. Okay, so I'll put that on the show notes. Another aspect of your work at NASA I wanted to ask was, you had mentioned that that as a immigrant and as a woman of color, you entered at a time where there was not many people that looked like you who had your
Still
background and
not really.
whatnot. Yeah, exactly.
Still
Still,
not a lot, but
what
a
do you
little more, but not a lot.
a little bit more, yeah. What do you say to young people who want to kind of go in your footsteps, and they may not necessarily become rocket scientists, but they want to do these work in these revolutionary fields that can really progress mankind? Are there any particular organizations or resources that you would point them to say, hey, listen, you can get help or mentoring, or a lot of times it's just who right? And that's still how the world works, is
Absolutely.
who and where. And your alma mater is
Howard University.
Howard University, right? So I'd love to hear about your thoughts on that, and how people can connect their dreams and passion to actually making something happen.
I would say representation matters.
Mm-hmm.
It is important for people to see others who look like them, especially in very unique fields like this, where there are not many people doing this, right? For young women, it's important for them to see other women who look like them doing this. Yeah. Then they're like, if she could do it, I could do it.
I can do it too. Yes,
exactly. You hear a lot of people talk about the story of the hidden figures and how upset they are that they never knew this until 3 years ago, about these amazing women who were at the forefront of human exploration, right? Were not for them, it was the invention of the computers. When we didn't trust computers, we were like, no, we want the humans to do the calculations, and then we will validate with the computers. Now, of course, we don't trust humans, we trust the computers. But no, their role is so critical. And I've heard so many people say, if I knew about them when I was growing up, oh my God, how different my life could have been. Yeah. Right? So representation is so important. So I always tell young people, seek mentors. Seek role models. It won't be easy, because these fields, if you're interested in astrophysics, planetary science, or geology, or whatever, these are not fields where there are a lot of women or a lot of women of color, but you got to go out there and look for them, reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out, and say, hey, like, I'm really interested in this field. I don't know what it entails. I would like to know, what is your day-to-day? What is a day in the life of a geologist? Is there a way I can come and do, a day with you in the field or something? It's so important to get that type of exposure and that type of experience, for it to crystallize in the minds of young people that they can actually do this.
That's important. You're right. Like you said, representation matters.
Representation matters.
When a child doesn't have to wonder why no one else looks like them, whether it's gender, or skin color, or the way their language, or the way they talk, or whatever it is, it's very empowering. It's very empowering.
Absolutely.
And so I'm glad you're right. I think being assertive in this day and age where information is at our fingertips, I think is very important. Are there any particular organizations that those who are looking for others like themselves who are in the STEM fields that they can go to, where it's a little bit more formalized, because they may be from an environment, a family or culture or whatnot, where they just don't have any access to someone like yourself, and they don't even know, okay, where do I even call, or who do I email? I can't, I live in California, or I live in Wyoming, or wherever you live. I don't have the means to go travel to.
So of course, I have a foundation. We could talk about that. And I started the foundation because I recognized that there were no little ones who looked like me in the pipeline. And I was like, well, how could we change this? How do we turn this around? The only way you can do that is through education, through exposure, through motivating these young people, through mentorship. So I mean, I mentor countless people, young women around the world, right? And I have a program called STEM Models, where I select professionals, usually women of color, who are doing unique careers, and they're available to serve as mentors. But there are a lot of other organizations. There are organizations like Black Girls Code, for example, that train girls 7 to 17 to learn how to code. We know that whole ecosystem, right? The technology ecosystem, Silicon Valley is a whole other beast that has not been readily accessible for young people of color. So there are several organizations. Black Girls Code is one of them, that kind of exposes young women to that, to teaching them coding and stuff like that. There are Girls Who Code. There's so many new STEM organizations out there that are trying to address this stigma, specifically I'm talking about girls, and encouraging them to go into STEM fields. But there are a lot of organizations, Girl Scouts, for example, they have a whole module that they focus on STEM. So there are a lot of organizations out there that you can Google, and that provide resources.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, things have progressed very much more positively than I remember when I was a kid. Where
me too.
I was just, you just went through the traditional route of learning. This is the days when the internet wasn't even around, which is probably a very funny thing to hear for some of our listeners and viewers, that wait, there was a time when there was no internet,
I was in grad school.
Yeah.
I was in grad school when Mosaic. Do you remember Mosaic? And I was like, what the heck is this?
It's one thing living at a time when a certain technology is just so ubiquitous that you don't even think twice, right? You don't think twice, like, okay, I always carry my phone. But there was a time where there was no phone to carry, and that you have rotary. It sounds funny to people listening to that.
And our generation, we kind of straddle that. Yeah. We went from no technology to all this technology, whereas our children grew up inside of this.
Exactly. And there's something really amazing to see that transformation, to be like, wow, I actually lived through. I've spoken to my grandparents, my wife's grandparents, who in India they were around where there was no electricity. In the British colonial time, right? Near independence time back in 1940s, and 1947 was independence. But they would tell us these stories. They're like, we owned farmland, and I would go on a horse with a shotgun where I had to. It was like one of those old ones where you had to actually pack the gunpowder in, like stuff that you'd see like in a movie, like a period piece, And they would say that, I would go around and I'd have an oil lantern, and I would have to look at, I would have to fight off squatters on my land. And then I still remember the first time I saw a light bulb, and you think about it, you're like, man, that is amazing progress in a few generations, that you go from no electricity to ubiquitous electricity and data all around you.
Yeah. And my mom is 90 years old. And of course she grew up in the era where technology is just not something that she is gonna be proficient in, and even at that age, even when she was a few years ago, we were trying to get her to use Facebook and stuff like that. And I see for us how we have just, transcended that. We're in between, but we've made that transition to all the technology. I keep up with everything,
It is a lot to keep up. It is a lot to keep up with.
It's a lot to keep up with.
Do you think that the more of this technology we have, especially with social media and whatnot, what effect do you think that has on people? Do you think it's positive? Do you think it's negative? Do you think it's what they make of it, more divisive, more unifying? What's your thought on it?
I think it's what we make of it, and people are gonna be who they are, and they're gonna be bad people who use it for perverse things. And we see all the great ways we get to use it to connect the world. I mean, the world has gotten so much smaller, and we can raise money for this. I mean, we get the information right away, and we could raise money to solve problems, help people, and stuff like that. So there are all these. I mean, I just think it's what we make of it, and who you are as a human using the technology, and
Yeah.
it could be good or bad.
Yeah, it's an amoral thing, right? It doesn't know right from wrong.
Exactly.
And it's funny because I think some social media platforms and certain types of technology, they tend to foster echo chambers at times, and it's like the rabbit hole. People just they don't know they're in the rabbit hole until they're
You don't
deep,
even know. You don't
very
even know.
deep into
Sometimes
it.
I'm like, why am I only seeing the same people over and over and over again? You realize it's the algorithm, and I hate that.
Yeah,
because
it
I'm
is.
following a diversity of people, and I want to see a diversity of things, of information, of knowledge, and stuff like that. And so that's where it is incumbent on you as the individual to go out and seek these different sources, especially for our information, our news, and stuff like that, and not just be wedded to one. But we don't even know we're being brainwashed, right? It's just
It's true.
one of those things where you're just like, wow, it takes some critical thinking to really understand that.
Well, it takes that, and it also takes like these type of conversations, because it's not a thing people think day to day. It's very easy to reflexively just be like, let me check my Twitter, let me get on Clubhouse, let me go on Facebook, I'm not trying to vilify social media. I think people have launched entire businesses based on social media platforms, and so there are a lot of positive things that happen, but I feel like it's very easy to, like you say, the brainwashing, the reflexive use of technology.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it with my own kids. An iPad is the same thing as a pacifier at some age.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh, well, okay, just here, quiet down. Take this, take that. And sometimes I think having these kind of conversations, at least you bring it back to life to be like, you know what, maybe I need to put this down for a little while, or maybe I need to block my time off to say, okay, I'm not going to use it. Use a certain tool here or there. But
that's the beauty of a platform like Clubhouse, where we're actually having conversations, and we're not just typing 140 word characters or whatever it is, which so much gets lost in that way of communicating, and so having the conversations is really a welcome change.
It is a welcome change. To switch gears, I wanted to ask you a few questions, particularly because you are a rocket scientist, and I think your viewpoint is going to be a little different than maybe other people's. So, completely out of left field, aliens.
Oh my God, we had this conversation.
I have to ask it. I find it a very fascinating topic.
I'm not into the alien talk at all. It's just actually, I often tell. This is a question I get from young people all the time when I go out to speak, right?
And I'm sure you're probably annoyed by it.
Humans are aliens, right? If other civilizations came in, they'll be like, who are these people? Just because how we think and the way we act and treat each other, and our planet and stuff like that. It's just
we're very tribal. We're very chimp-like. We still act as these sort of hairy primates, and but I'm just wondering your take on it, because obviously there's an entire world of people who believe in UFOs, and they're self-proclaimed ufologists, and I sort of laugh at it, because coming from a scientific background, I look at it like, okay, where's the evidence, or even mathematically, theoretically, can be possible. And I still believe there's probably extraterrestrial life, but I don't really know what I mean, to say that it's going to look like us, talk like us, that's just, you're just making everything human like. And we've done that with religion. We've done that with so many different things. We see faces on the moon, and we're like, well, it's
Or
kind
the
of
green
shadows.
man with the big eyes, right?
Green man
Like
with the
that's
big eyes.
our concept. That's our, it's part of our linear thinking.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
how
Well,
our
it's like
brains
a
work, the
survival instinct. Like,
limitations.
yeah, it's like we need to be able to look at threats, right? And so
Exactly.
our minds are like, we're drawn to faces, contrast between light and
Exactly.
dark things. I mean,
Exactly.
we have we have an entire different area of the brain that perceives motion compared to the actual colors and the other senses, which is interesting. That this is how we evolved. That motion out in the field, even though we don't know what it is, our eyes go right towards it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a survival instinct. Like you want to see the lion in the bush, or some
Mm-hmm.
bear, some threat to you and your kin or whatever. So I just I want to just get your take on it, to be like, let's say forget aliens, but what do you think about the notion of extraterrestrial life? That
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. It is so, it's our hubris as humans to think that we are the only life that exists. And in the life forms that we understand, which is human life form. But not at all. That's not how I think about it. And I always tell people, you gotta think critically, but that's just
hmm,
not something that comes naturally to people because we just don't educate people like that. Whole other story. But
yes,
our universe is too vast not to have other life out there. Now, what that life looks like is a whole other thing. It could be microbial life. When we say we're searching for life,
yeah,
it's microbial life. It's not necessarily human life or anything like that, right? But
yeah,
we have missions that have identified exoplanets or Earth-like planets. That's what we're looking for in other galaxies, right? And that with the right kind of conditions, the distance from the sun, the revolution of the planet, the kind of atmospheric pressure that could be developed in that kind of environment. We know that, at least based on what we know about how life is fostered here on Earth, with the presence of water and stuff, that possibly those conditions, if they exist in other planets and other galaxies, then life could be, some kind of life could be fostered. So that's how we think about it. And that's how I think about it. I just don't think our universe is too vast. Whether or not we advance enough as a human species to identify what that looks like is, it's going to be another story. But we have questions that we are asking, and we use a very disciplined scientific inquiry process to answer those questions, right? So yeah,
yeah,
it's only a matter of time. I don't know if in my lifetime, but yeah.
yeah. In one way, I don't know how humans would even react to extraterrestrial life. I think it would throw some people for such a mental loop, that their entire construct of what is reality, and what is, like, we, like you say, we have a lot of hubris. We think that just because we are here, everything is for us, which is
Yeah.
the ultimate hubris that you can have. And to say that, well, we actually found some type of life, in XYZ, or
Mm-hmm.
the clouds of Venus, or on Mars or whatnot. I feel like the first reaction a lot of people may have is, yeah, I don't believe you. And we've seen a lot of the I don't believe you this year when it comes to science.
Yeah.
And I feel like that little discovery and those little victories of progressing science, I think there's only going to be a handful of people really cheering for it at first. Like people like you and I would be like,
And look how
oh, this is
tangible that
amazing.
was this year. I mean, it was a virus that they could see and study and stuff like that. And people are just like, okay,
I
like,
don't believe
like
it. I mean, I believe if there was ever a stronger case for STEM education from like the pre-K age period, is this the denial of science itself.
I think about that,
And
or I've thought about that for the last 9 months.
yeah, and I try not to get political, especially on these podcasts about this, but it makes you wonder where humanity is heading. If this is the type of thinking that there is.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
I'm concerned too. Actually, I'm very concerned. The denial of science and empirical based, evidence and investigation. I don't know. Yeah.
yeah, I'm hoping 2021, although it's not going to change humans that much, obviously, but I'm hoping that as we have the rollout of these vaccines, which again were all developed using scientific principles,
Exactly.
so the same people that don't believe in science will end up getting a vaccine which was produced exactly through the disciplines within
Exactly.
science, which is
Exactly.
you can't even make this up. Like if you were to write some comedy skit, you couldn't even like. It's so ironic that I guess the truth or reality is stranger than fiction, so to speak.
I
And
think for people, they think science is so much above their heads, right? And I think as people in these fields, we must be cognizant about how we are communicating the
yes,
information in a
yes,
way that people you have to meet people where they are, right? So
yes,
you have to be able to dilute the explanation without changing the real scientific workings of whatever it is
yeah, the
that
essence
you're
of it.
talking about, right?
Yeah,
But we have to be better communicators. I think that is incumbent upon us as scientists, researchers, engineers, that it is important that we communicate in a way that not just captures the imagination of the layperson, but they actually could relate to it
mm-hmm.
as something that impacts their lives, their
Yes.
individual lives, right? And so that's something we have to recognize, that there's work to be done there.
I give a lot of credit to a lot of the scientists in the astronomy, astrophysics, cosmology
Cosmology.
fields,
Mm-hmm.
the ones that have really focused on, public, education
Yes.
about science, about especially with their disciplines, because like you say, when people don't understand how something that seems very ethereal, that
Mm-hmm.
space and vaccines and virus, I mean things that you can't touch, feel, or see, right?
Yep.
That's the notion of what the average person is going to think.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't bring it to their level to be like, well, this is how it affects you. Why does space commercialization actually why is it worth taxpayer dollars to support? Is because here's all the things that have already come down and trickled down, so to speak, into your
Exactly.
life because of these investments. And
Exactly.
and I wish that other scientific I mean, I know in medicine, I will tell you that we are not that good at it. Like physicians, for one reason or another, I don't know exactly what. I mean, we definitely don't have any formal education in
Yeah.
how to. I mean, medical schools have tried to their credit. Some physicians are really great, public sort of orators and whatnot. But the average physician, they speak in medical speak to the
Mm-hmm.
to a patient, and a lot of times the patient encounter is more like, okay, I, the patient, came here worried. Now I'm worried and confused,
Mm-hmm.
and then I walk right back
Exactly.
out. And and I wish we were better at it. I wish number one, we had the time to discuss things better, which is
Yeah.
a whole different problem.
That's a whole
But
other thing.
I wish we had those personalities like the Neil deGrasse Tysons
Yes,
and the
exactly.
and like those individuals, but that commanded the same level of respect, audience, or whatnot in these other disciplines.
It's
I
a
mean,
skill though, Falcon. It's a
it
skill,
is.
and not everybody has it. But
Yeah.
the best way to communicate science is through storytelling, which is really how humans relate to each other,
Yes.
right? We relate through stories. And I had such a great boss who was a master at that when I worked in ISS. And a lot of our job was communicating, not just
Hmm.
communicating to the public to build advocacy for the space station, but communicating to the science community so that they knew this was a resource that they had access to, right? And so I learned so much through that experience about the importance of telling stories, meeting people where they are, and relating it to them in a way that they can understand in their lives, you know. And so we just got to do a better job of that.
Yeah, no, I think we do. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we're going to make progress in that, you know, and I mean, you know, we have people such as yourself, you know, who you're a great communicator, but you also have this entire, you know, entire lifetime almost of knowledge and experience that you can impart. And I think that, you know, that wisdom sometimes can be hard to find, but I'm glad, you know, we're able to have these kind of discussions and you know, and get it out there. What else are you looking forward to in 2021 and beyond? You know, what do you want to see more, and you know, how can people help with that?
I am looking forward to getting back out on the road. Before the
A lot of
pandemic,
people got to
last
get
year,
it.
no, Falcon, last year I went to 10 countries, five of which
Wow.
were speaking, like invitations to speak. I miss that so much. So that's one thing. I know it's not going to happen soon as we turn the corner in 21. It's probably going to happen to the end of 21, actually maybe early 22. But I look forward to when I could do that again. And I will tell you this story. I'm a space diplomat for the State Department. They asked me to join their speakers program. And last year they sent me to Central Asia, 3 countries in Central Asia.
Where'd you go?
Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan.
Wow.
And it was amazing because they had reached out to me earlier in the year to mentor a group of girls in Kyrgyzstan who decided that they wanted to show their government that girls could do science, and they wanted to develop and fly a CubeSat. So the State Department reached out to me to ask me to mentor them. And I said, of course, absolutely. And so I would be on a Zoom call midnight my time. It was 9 o'clock their time.
Sure.
You know, guiding them through their endeavors. And then this opportunity came in the summer to go to Central Asia. And they were like, well, you were mentoring the girls. Do you want to go to, I got invited to go to Uzbekistan, but they were like, oh, Kyrgyzstan is not too far. And in order to go to Kyrgyzstan, you got to go to Kazakhstan. So do you want to go to, so it was this amazing 10-day trip of meeting the hundreds of young people and talking about space and science. And oh my God, like oh my gosh. And it's such a memorable experience. So I'm looking forward to that coming up again. Going to maybe some countries in Africa. I want to go to like South Africa and Ghana to inspire the youth there too. So that is one of the big things for me that I am really wanting to do. And then of course laying the foundation for having my own entrepreneurial endeavors once my public servant career has come to a close.
Are you able to speak to what idea you have, or is it stealth mode?
It's in stealth mode.
It's in stealth mode. Well, next time we have you back on, hopefully it's not in stealth mode and you can talk about it. And I think, but you know, it's inspiring to hear that there is that outreach, international outreach by, you know, parts of the U.S. government, you know, that otherwise, I mean, again, this is my assumption that those girls, you know, would not have had that access to someone like yourself, or to the resources, you know, that the U.S. government can afford, that a lot of countries just cannot. And I feel like, you know, for you, I'm sure it was a memorable trip and it meant a lot. But I think to those girls, it was probably a millionfold as powerful, because, you know, they'll always keep that, you know, from that childhood, from that young age, they'll keep that to be like, my God, like I had that experience, and it's I think it's amazing what you're doing, because you're literally planting all these seeds for the future, which not many people get to do,
Yeah.
even if they want to do.
I'll tell you another story. This was maybe 4 years ago. I was at a conference that the International Space Station program puts on, and they were doing some social media stuff. They had some of the women scientists, on the live. I think it was a celebrity's live account, and they took it over or something. So we were talking. And so I get back to my hotel room, and I go on my Facebook Messenger, and there is a message from this young girl in India.
Mm-hmm.
And she reaches out and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I just saw you on Instagram, and I'm always dreamt of being like a space scientist or something. And oh my gosh." And so we fostered that relationship, and I've guided her and mentored her and stuff like that. But that it's stuff like that I get the honor and pleasure of doing, and just serving as a role model for young people. I don't take it lightly at all.
When things get safer to travel or whatnot, where's the first place you want to go?
Where's the first place I want to go? Oh my God. So one of my favorite places on the planet is Italy. Tuscany.
Yes.
And I visited there. My daughter was studying. She was doing a summer in Tuscany, in Siena. This was about 4 years ago, and I got to visit, and I would love to go. I dream of actually kind of having a house there, and so that's one of the first places that I would love to go back to.
Yeah, no, Italy sounds like we were supposed to go this year and everything got canceled. And that was, let's just say, it was heartbreaking.
It's so breathtaking. I've just been fortunate to travel to many places, and that's just what I love, just meeting, people of other cultures and experiencing, just how other people live around the world. It's something special. I wish more Americans could do that, because I think we would have a different perspective, our place in the world,
it was
that's a whole other conversation.
No, definitely. But it's interesting you bring that up, because recently, so I follow the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, and he has some very interesting guests. And recently, he actually had a former NASA astronaut. I think his name is Terry Virts, Virts.
Terry Virts, yes, I know him.
And he says something really interesting that I think goes along with what you said about traveling and seeing other parts of the world. Where he said that before he went into space, especially when he spent, I think, 200 days out in the space station or whatever it was, he said that before he went, whenever he used to travel, if he went to Korea, if he went to anywhere in Africa, it didn't matter where he went, it would be like, okay, I'm here, I'm in this other country, but my home is back in the States. I'm here. He said that his whole viewpoint changed when he saw Earth from the space station. And I think Joe Rogan asked him that, what did it feel like, seeing it? He goes, it never got old. But he says his perspective, what it changed was that after he came back, no matter where he went, he always felt like he was home. And I think his point is that if people can see what I have seen, I think it would really change their perspective to say that, yeah, we're all kind of in this together. We're on this huge rock, and this whole this is mine and that's yours, and we fight for this, and we the divisiveness for some people, not all people, but for some people, it may dissolve away. And
I always wish that these heads of governments could experience that, because then we wouldn't be fighting over the stuff that we fight for.
Seems petty.
But
for a
it's
while.
called the overview effect.
Okay, so there's a name
And
for
they
it.
don't
Good.
see, yes, they have a language for it, and you just don't see borders. Like, it's our world,
Yeah,
it's our
yeah.
planet, it's
I,
home,
I
you
thought it was
know?
awesome the way he explained it because, and you know, because it was on video, so you can see like even his face, you can see the look, you know, and that that's what we need. Honestly, I feel like we need that more and more because, you know, again, the echo chambers, the borders, the this, you know, I'm this and you're that, and you know, the hashtags, and I'm hoping that there comes a time, at least in my lifetime, where there's that suborbital flights or just near
It's
orbital
cheap
flights
enough
are
that
cheap enough
people,
that
yep,
you know you can do it with your loved
absolutely,
one or gift it to someone
yep.
and be like, you know what, before you know depart this earth, this you know life, I want you to see this once. And it's funny, I have a photo above my desk, and it's the photo of the Earth from the moon, this very famous photograph. And I
Yes,
always keep it there because it just gives you perspective. You know, obviously I can't be there to do that, but at least you see it and you realize you know, some of the things we complain about, some of the things that bother us on the day to day, they all of a sudden they become petty, and you're like, don't worry about this, don't worry about that. And I think that perspective matters.
that image is called Earthrise. And
Likewise,
I
yes.
believe it's the Apollo 17 crew.
I
Don't
think
quote me
so.
on
Yeah.
that. Um,
Amazon, of course, recommended it to me because I was searching for something else. So these, so it's not all nefarious. I was like, yeah, I'll buy this. This is great. I love it. Yeah. Earthrise, yeah. So
Earthrise.
it's great. I get to see
Yeah.
Earthrise every day. You know.
No, it's that's the beauty of being involved in space, and that's what I wanted for every little girl when I started my foundation, is that they could look up or they could be involved in something so much greater than themselves,
Yeah.
that it just pulls you out of the smallness of our lives to what working towards something that's so much greater than us as humans, and that's the privilege I've had for the last quarter century, you know.
Your foundation. What is the name of your foundation again?
The Brightest Stars Foundation. And it
And
really, that was my vision, that, that's it. It's that girls get to aspire to something bigger, that they
is this
see
a
the greatness in themselves.
is it a U.S. based
It's
organization? Is it
international.
global? It's
It's
international.
global. It's global. It's global.
It's
And again,
great.
I started it because I realized there were no little ones like me in the pipeline. I was like, wait a second, there's something that I need to do. I'm obligated to do something because I'd had so much success up to that point, so yeah.
You based on the foundation and the people that you've met through it, are there young Camille's in now working their way towards a career
Quite a few actually
in
who have gone
sciences?
through school. There's this young woman who is still a protege of mine. She saw me speak in Trinidad, and
Mhm.
she had always dreamt of space, but never knew that there was
Yeah.
anything that she could do. And she heard my story, and she ended up going to England and getting her PhD in working up to a PhD in
Wow.
astrophysics. And
Nice.
now she's a postdoc at Stanford. Like, come on, like,
That's a
only
great journey.
because of that moment where she heard and met me and heard my story and stuff. And there are many examples of that where I've mentored and guided young women through there. Young men too, actually. Young men reach out to me too, and I don't turn them away, but I'm focused on the girls. And so
Yeah.
yeah.
No, we'll put a link to your foundation also in the show notes, and people can explore and see if they can support. You know.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what else do you want the listeners to know about your journey, about about things to look forward to from you, from NASA, from for the future, right? I mean, we want to instill hope and give inspiration. And, you know, I would love people to go into 2021 and beyond and think back to this conversation and be like, you know what, I'm going to go for what my passion is.
Yeah. No, I think so much of this year, because it was so foreign to us. I mean, it's been 100 years since there's been this kind of experience as humans, that we spent a lot of energy resisting what's actually happening instead of the perspective of, okay, this is where we are and we're nowhere else. And how can I make the best use of this time? Maybe there were things that I didn't get to do because life was so busy and I was so much in the rat race. And now, because it's slowed down, I get a chance to pursue something that I gave up on, right? So that's what I want people to think about going into 2021. You know, that this is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. You don't get a second chance at this life. And to me, it's worth living if you are going out there finding the things that you love, that passion inside of you, whatever that is, and really sharing that with the world. I always say that's how we illuminate the world, is by sharing our gifts, you know, and that's what I want for everybody.
No, I think that's a great message. And how can people follow you? How, you know, on social media?
I'm on every social media. IG, Twitter,
You're connected.
Facebook, like you can find me. You could just Google my name. You'll find me.
Okay.
LinkedIn.
Well, I'll put some links on the show notes as well, so you know it will make it easier on people. Well, you know, time flew by. We've been talking almost 2 hours and 40 minutes, and it doesn't seem like that. So I think this is a good as place as any to wrap it up. I want to thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege to have you on, and for sharing your story, and for on behalf of the listeners. I'm sure they would want you to be on the podcast again sometime soon. So, you know, we'll try to make that happen. But thank you, Dr. Camille Alleyne. Really appreciate your insight.
Thank you so much for having me, Falcon. It's been an honor and a pleasure to speak with you the last couple of hours, and I really look forward to actually things we could do in the future together. So thank you.
Definitely. Okay, everyone, we're signing off.